Hello, everyone. I would like to introduce Karin VonKrenner. She majored in journalism and political science at the University of Montana, and her professional life has been deeply rooted in international relations, law, and politics. She is AP trained and carries a legitimate press badge. She has emerged as a compelling voice, illuminating the nuances of cultures, advocating for justice, and capturing the essence of humanity through her words and lens. And I have to personally say that I always enjoy reading her articles. Welcome, Karin. So tell me, what's on your mind these days? I know there's always something going on in that mind of yours.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for that absolutely amazing introduction. I'd like to meet that woman someday.
Well, I'll send you a mirror, okay?
Wow. What is on my mind? Yes, you kind of put me on the spot there. I guess what's on everybody's mind, the headlines across every newspaper and news line at the moment. War in Israel. And without taking a side on either side of a very delicate issue with many, many layers to it, it led me to what I feel is almost a deeper, more global issue, and that is war in and of itself and the impact it has on the environment. And we do generally understand what that means. We see the bombs, we see the destruction, we see, the infrastructure and the people. But what got me kind of really going into my many rabbit holes of research was how little this topic is spoken about, dealt with on the international level and on country levels, and how much impact it has not only through our history, it has become part of our history, but also that we are in a climate crisis. And again, however you feel about those words, climate crisis, we do know that this is going on and that issues with the climate are happening. We watch it out our window, we experience it in whatever part of the world we are, whether it's too hot or too cold. But adding in to wars around the world, of which currently there's more than 23 wars and military conflicts taking on around the world, and more happening every day, that impact on the environment added to the climate crisis just blew my mind, literally, delving into that. So that's pretty much been on my mind and on my desk recently.
I understand that this really is a delicate issue to talk about, and I really appreciate your having the courage to do this. And I hope the audience will appreciate that you are very carefully choosing your words, because you are not trying to divide people or turn people against each other. We're trying to have a real conversation about something that we all need to have a conversation about. So I really appreciate your bringing this on. So give us some basis or background to help the audience understand what they're dealing with here.
If we look at the environment as a separate entity from the military, it's very hard to create that bridge. But if we look into our near history, like I said, we can go back as far history as Alexander the Great and keep going backwards to understand that at times there's two levels to this conversation. There is the militarization, the weaponization of the environment, And that's part one of a conversation. And part two is the impact of war or military conflicts on the environment. And it becomes an extremely delicate subject within international political laws. The weaponization of environmental elements has been throughout history. A classic one would be water. Water breaking dams in the Ukraine recently, in China was one of the biggest ones, has been used in military operations as a weapon, flooding or water to stop people from advancing, military armies from advancing, from destroying. I mean, it's like the wet version of scorched earth policy. Unfortunately, what happens in both scorched earth and flooding using water as a weapon or fire as a weapon, not only does it cause huge civilian harm, but it also causes extended environmental harm. So it's rather a complex thing of using the environmental resource as a weapon on one hand, and the impact that weapon has on the environment. Again, it's kind of a twisted little game that gets played. The weaponization of the natural resources causes a deeper environmental impact than even a military campaign. A military campaign causes severe environmental damage merely by existing, even before you get to actual conflict. So you have movement of military equipment. The ships are moving, the trucks are moving, the soldiers are moving. And as troops move across geographical areas, you're causing a lot of damage. A huge amount of troops moving will flatten agricultural lands, farms, and things like that. We've seen that repeatedly in war zones. Pre-war zones, World War I, World War II, conquering armies come in, and the environment takes that huge impact. That is pre-war impact. Once you engage in actual military conflict, you're adding an additional layer of damage to the environment through the bombing, toxic materials, et cetera, et cetera. And then you add almost a third level of damage to the environment when you weaponize a particular natural resource, for example, water. It's the easiest one to use. You flood out an entire river, you break dams, and you flood an entire river out. So you've caused a river its natural directions to break. It's overflooding into agricultural lands or small towns and cities, causing further damage, which then continues into disease and water that is not drinkable. It breaks down ecosystems, et cetera, et cetera. So you're talking layers and layers of environmental impact that comes from even pre-military conflict. And it's that joining of impacts what has caught my attention and further surprised me quite a bit in how we don't talk about it. We actually avoid talking about it to the point it's very hard to find actual fact-based studies that will define the impact of military issues. And that one absolutely fascinates me to this point.
So if people become more aware of this, I guess we have to talk about how this impacts everyone, not just the people that are there in the middle of the war or the military or the battles, but people all over the world. Because I can't help feeling that at this point, whatever is happening anywhere is affecting all of us eventually.
Yes. And again, that's a rather interesting conversation. I call it, and I've kind of coined the phrase, the over there syndrome.
Right.
And in our worlds where we live in day by day, everything can be wonderful. We go shopping to Costco, we watch our Netflix, we go to our jobs, we meet our friends for pizza. Our world seems to be fine. Over there might be a war in Israel, there might be a war in Ukraine. Over there, things are terrible. And we briefly see them as they pass our screen or as we scroll down, but it's over there. It doesn't affect us. I don't believe that's true in any way, shape, or form. We are a global economy, which is also breaking down. But we operate as a global system, and that's economically, and that's geographically, and that is environmentally. So what is happening over there will eventually drift faster or slower, depending on the situation, to where we are, to our over here. And I feel that those discussions need to come more to the front, that because it's over there, we cannot choose to ignore it and let it pass our screens. We need to be more actively involved in saying, okay, what's happening over there? We bear a responsibility of it. We cannot say that something that's happening in one end of the planet we have no relationship to, because we do. If we bring it to an economic level, for example, let's look at what's happening in the Red Sea with the Houthis. That is having a direct impact over there. That impact over here is affecting shipping. It's affecting prices in gas. It's affecting if Amazon can deliver certain products to your door. It's affecting the cost of food, because everything that's happening over there has slowed shipping down, blocked shipping lanes. Products cannot get through. If they can, they have to go through a circuitous land route that costs more in transportation, more in fuel, and more impact on the environment, et cetera, et cetera. So the belief that things that are over there don't affect us over here is actually not foundationally true. We believe what we believe. And as humans and culturally directed beings, we feel entitled to our personal opinions and choices. And we define our worlds through the political and religious frames that we are most familiar with and most comfortable with. So things, again, and war itself and the topic of war and even the environment, and putting the two together as in war and the environment, is a highly charged and emotional response. It could be perceived as a threat, even the conversation itself. Exactly. It's over there. Stay over there where it's safe.
Exactly. And I'm finding that here, certainly in the US, having a conversation about any of this is extremely difficult. So my question now is, how can we make it, what's a way to approach it to make it safe to have a conversation so it's not polarized and we can have a real conversation with people talking about this, guess what? This really is impacting us.
That's a highly charged question, especially in the US. As a culture in the US, you go to Thanksgiving and you're like, we don't talk religion, we don't talk politics. It's kind of the accepted thing, right? The pandemic blew that one up a bit, well, a lot. And we started really getting into politics and things, and we broke the conversation. Before we were silent, but it was kind of there, but now we broke the conversation. It became very divisive. So in trying to answer that, as a culturally directed American, very gently, and without fear. On one hand, we constantly hear a message of be your authentic, transparent self. That is the message that we're given publicly and through all things. But in reality, we are asked to be silent and almost lie, agree with what is politically accepted and correct in that moment, because the next moment it could be something else, which means people have become silenced. We're afraid to speak and be authentic and transparent. I mean, even in speaking here with you, I'm kind of, walking a little bit on eggshells because we're so afraid of offending everybody with the truth that we don't speak the truth, whether it's our own truth or an obvious truth. So gently, but also simply and clearly. I can say something which I'm going to clearly say, this is my opinion. It is my opinion. And you can accept my opinion, or you can say, no, I have a different opinion. But again, another word that's been tossed around quite a bit is respect. Respect, I will show you respect by saying, I value that you have a differing opinion from me. I actually enjoy having a debate, not an argument, a debate with somebody who is completely on a different platform, almost opposition to what I believe in. I feel it's an opportunity to either learn where they're coming from and probably change mine if I figure, wow, okay, I was completely wrong, or that they have an opportunity to say the same thing. Well, wait a minute, I didn't know about that, and maybe I'm going to change my opinion. I see it as not a fight or an argument. I see it as an absolute amazing learning opportunity and conversation opportunity. So trying to answer your question, which I said is a very layered, difficult question, especially in this country, don't take offense.
Right.
So, yeah.
I heard an interview with you where you were explaining that the one safe place where you could actually talk with people, even if you have totally differing viewpoints, was through the arts.
Yes, that one. I've always been a fan of the arts. I grew up in the art world. My father was a well-known artist. But I discovered this very much in the pandemic. So when the world shut down and protests roiled the world and the country, I basically got in my car and started driving through all the protests, covering them, and went across the country, and oddly enough, several countries in the pandemic. And people were afraid, people were angry, and people were pretty much fighting. It's okay, let's be true and authentic. They were fighting. Everybody was fighting with everybody, whether it was about Black Lives Matter, whether it was about the virus or COVID, whether it was about borders, immigration, everything was a fight for those 2 years. And driving through the protests, I bumped occasionally into artists, musicians, and art exhibitions. And it was the one place where suddenly all these fighting factions of differing people with different ideas and different emotions could talk to each other, because they weren't talking about a political issue. They were talking about their actual feelings that came from this piece of art. And that became an authentic and transparent conversation that wasn't layered in hate and politics. It was layered with curiosity and sharing. And that one, again, blew my mind on a lot of levels. And I thought, well, okay, here's something that can build bridges.
So maybe we need to figure out a way to use the arts as a safe place to start conversations. Just a thought.
I like the thought. Again, it has layers to it, as everything does. There is, in every movement of the best intent, there will be politics creeping in and clawing its way in. And if we round the conversation back into war and military and the environment, three compacted issues going on here, art can cover them. But if we consider, as a war correspondent, you're taking photographs of very horrific things that are fact-based. And an artist's interpretation of that are, you have already two different things of what's going on. So somewhere between the two, of the fact and the interpretation of that fact, there has to be a space for the conversation that is authentic and transparent, that isn't an argument.
Right.
And that's a respectful, open conversation that says, that is how you see it, that is based on this, and that is the space we have to talk about it. If we can do that, it would be amazing.
I think so too. I think having getting a conversation going where you can have sharing opposing thoughts and you can learn from each other. I mean, you always do, because there's some basis on either, well, I don't even see sides, honestly, which is part of my problem, because I really believe everybody is unique. And if they can trust their own uniqueness, we probably wouldn't get so polarized the way we are now.
I would add an additional layer to that, if it's okay, and that is cultural.
Right.
Again, we have this belief that the world is very homogenized. I will use Europe as an example. We talk about the EU, and it's like, oh, that's one big homogenized country. But you very quickly learn, and it's quite amazing, you can have breakfast in Germany, lunch in France, then have dinner in Spain. You don't, boom, all in one day. But you're also crossing cultural issues and deep cultural norms and thought processes. That's the most important for me, is to understand that these thought processes go back generations.
Right.
I find a lot of history repeats itself based on cultural thought processes. We can look at what's happening in Europe now and almost revert it back to previous incidents in history, which is a little bit concerning. To understand that a German is completely different than an Italian, is different than a Frenchman, is different than a British, is almost foundational into having a proactive, positive conversation. I'm American in my heart and soul almost, but I'm also not. But as an American, I also realize that we are United States of America. First of all, I'll throw the question, are we really? Especially now. But culturally, we're also 50 different states, and each state has its own culture. Right. Its own differences, to the point, like I said, I work a lot in the legal environment also, when I work with human rights. And it used to fascinate me that I would literally have to stop at a state border, if I'm working on a legal case. And then at one state, I had to actually physically walk the person involved across to the next state where they could be accepted. And I'm like, well, I thought this was one country. So even state by state, our laws and our cultures are different in the United States of America. Europe, even more so, right? You have different cultures, different languages. At least here we all speak kind of the same language. So you take that again to a global context. And I find, again, on a practical level, this kind of, marketing. Everybody's like, what is your audience? What is your target audience? Well, it's this person who lives in Arizona, this age group, whatever. And I'm like, that was then. Today, we live in a globally interconnected world. Your target audience isn't just the person of this age group in this geographical place in this particular country. It's the whole world. The internet, communication systems, everything took over there and brought it, everything is here. And when we communicate, I feel that that's very important to remember that the cultural differences are there, the cultural memories are there, the traditions are there, but we're still a connected community.
So how do we make that? Because having traveled around the world and engaged in different cultures, which I love doing, and other people probably, it scares them because they don't, it feels so different.
Foreign.
Yes, it feels so foreign to them. But how do we help people to understand it's not a threat to them that somebody is
Different?
culturally different, etc.? It's because it's working against all of us, this polarization, this divisiveness.
Acceptance, and a curious sense of humor, I would say, and it's helped me many times in my life.
Right.
For example, I was working a couple of years ago in Italy. We were working with the Palestinians and an Israeli in a peace project. And it was amazing. We had people from all over Europe attending. We had many young Palestinians attending, boys and girls. And again, it was a very mixed but good group, fun group. Everybody was excited about the project. And during the lecture series and the classes, everything was fantastic. Everybody, kind of stuck to their comfort zone, but we were all together. And it didn't the cultural wall didn't hit until that evening when we all went to the cafeteria to have dinner. And the Europeans all mixed together and everybody was sitting, the men and the women sitting together, everybody was having their dinner and everybody was having a great time. And the young Palestinian women came in and they sat in the corner and they were all okay. And then a few minutes later, maybe 5 or 10 minutes later, the young men came to the door and immediately stopped. They froze at the threshold of the door because they'd looked in and they'd seen the girls. And from the European side, the conversation suddenly lulled because you couldn't miss it. There was this bunch of young men just literally frozen at the door. And it was like, what's going on here? And I'm watching this going, okay, something cultural is happening here. Let me think this one through. And I've spent a majority of my time in the Middle East. So I'm like, okay, I think I know what might be happening. I'm not sure, but I think. So I went over to the young men and I said, why are you not coming in? Is there something going on here? And very bright young men, they said, we can't come in. There's, these young women are here and they sit in this particular environment. We can't come in. We don't want to insult them or put them in any kind of a danger when they return home. And I'm like, okay, this could be a big problem here. So the Europeans were saying, come on, it's okay. And I'm like, not quite. We have to figure an answer through this one. So I'm thinking, okay, we do have a very strong cultural tradition here. And it might be okay in this mixed environment to mix up and do everything, but these people have to go home. They have to face their culture going home over there. So now they're over here, but they're going to go back over there. And how is that going to be handled? So one of the prime things is, again, and the Middle East can be very difficult to explain to a Westerner because there are so many levels to it. I don't understand it. I get hit the wall sometimes. But somewhere in here, there is a layer of respect and protection for women. So in what they were trying to do is respect and protect the women that were there by not putting them in a position where they did not have a family member with them. And I'm like, okay, is this where the issue is? Yes, they are not our family. We can't sit at the table with them. That would be too much. I'm like, okay. So I went back to the girls and I said, look, this is the issue. Would you girls be willing, or do you see this as a possibility? Because I don't know. This is part of your culture. I do not know that if they were your brothers, would they be able to sit with you, or your cousins? And they're like, if they were family, they could. Now, I do know that in that culture, you can adopt family members. So I said, is it possible that they can become your brothers? Yes, that's that, there's mutual acceptance. So I said, okay, hold on. So I ran over to the guys and I said, okay, would it be possible for you to adopt these women and all the women in the room, because we're all included in this at this point, as your sisters? So they went off in a little huddle. They had a discussion and they came back and they said, yes, if we adopt you as our sisters publicly, then we can come in and sit down with you. And that's exactly what we did.
I love it. That's a phenomenal story. Thank you.
So again, it's a point of, I didn't understand completely the culture. I had a little bits and pieces of what I thought was going on. And I had to take those. And this is what I said about curiosity with a sense of humor and ability to say, let's try this. Who knows?
Right.
Sometimes it works.
I also feel, though, with the arts that, for example, music is universal.
We had the best times. Everybody will get up and dance to music.
Exactly. And, it's just something that everybody responds to. And maybe, just starting with the arts, with music, especially in different dance forms and,
well, back to the West. I mean, well, not everyone, that's too much of a general comment. My pardons. Most of us have been to concerts, like a major concert. I mean, my favorite was the Eagles. I mean, I was like, but you get literally thousands of people from different states, different backgrounds, different cultures in a concert hall, thousands of people. And in the distance, there's a bunch of musicians, right? And they're playing. And for the period of almost 3 hours, there's this most amazing, cohesive, positive feeling among thousands of people, just because there's 4 people over there playing music.
right.
And to me, that has always been absolutely awesome, in that connectedness that thousands of strangers can have for 3 hours because of music. So I don't know how we engage that power on a global system, except back in the day when they had the big bands for Africa and the Band-Aid concerts and things like that. They sort of harnessed that feeling. But I don't think we've actually done that for a long time, at least not that I can think of.
Yeah, it's been a long time, but it's certainly something that we can work towards. I'm sure there are lots of artists and musicians and dancers, etc., that would be really interested in doing something that could help open up the conversation and dissipate the extreme polarization and divisiveness that's going on in the world, not just in the US. I mean, the US is kind of obvious in your face, but it's happening everywhere.
It's happening everywhere. It's not just the US anymore. I mean, you're seeing it in Europe. Right now there's the farmers' strikes across Europe. So it's spreading everywhere. It's not over there. It's not just here. It's kind of everywhere now, to the point it's we're in a pivotal moment of change for the entire world on so many levels. And the thing that we need the most is the ability to be authentic and transparent in our communications with respect. I don't feel that, okay, I'm going to step right into it. I don't feel personally that respect and free speech means that I can tell somebody that everything they believe in is wrong, or that I can call them names or things like that. I don't think that's an honest, free speech, respectful conversation.
Right.
You're entitled to what you believe and your opinion and your culture. I don't have to agree with it, but I need to respect it. As a journalist, one of the primary foundations of what I call old journalism versus social media is maintaining neutrality. It's hard, especially in certain circumstances. In a war, it's very hard to be the observer and to be neutral. But if we can find that ground and have communication in that ground, I think it's going to be an amazing thing.
So thank you so much. I think you've brought up several conversation triggers.
We've kind of run around the table a few times.
But lots to work with, and a lot to think about, like how we can bring art as the way to help the conversation begin by creating safe space. Because I think the arts, as you pointed out in that interview, the arts seems to create safe space for everybody to just be comfortable with being human beings on this earth.
Very much so. Like I said, it's like I said, it's being authentic and transparent and not being afraid to be that, and not being afraid that your opinion will upset somebody, because what's the old saying, not everybody's going to like you. Well, not everybody's going to agree with you, but that's okay.
Yeah, we can, if we can get to, we agree to disagree.
Yes.
That would be a good starting point for humanity. Thank you so much. I have really enjoyed this, and I hope everybody who's watching this has enjoyed it. And your insights are really amazing, and I appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I appreciate it.